There is a moment in every creator's life when the world demands speed, shortcuts, and instant applause. But your craft asks for something far more demanding: honesty. Artistic integrity isn't about perfection. It's about courage. The courage to say no when everyone else wants you to say yes. The courage to create what is true instead of what is trendy. The courage to protect the soul of your work even when compromise seems easier, faster, safer. Because every time you betray your artistic integrity, a piece of your voice is lost. But every time you protect it, even in small, quiet decisions, your voice becomes unmistakable. Your art is not just what you make, it's who you become while making it. And the world doesn't need more polished productions, it needs more honest creators. Creators who stand for something, creators who refuse to dilute their message, creators who build work that outlives the moment. And the urgency is simple. If you don't guard your artistic integrity today, tomorrow you may not have any left to protect. The truth behind the work is the real test of a man because it reveals what he stands for when no reward is guaranteed. When men create, they aren't just shaping an idea, they are exposing the parts of themselves they often keep hidden. The work becomes a mirror, showing whether they are driven by purpose or pressure, authenticity or expectation. And in that quiet space, where no applause exists, a man discovers whether he is building something he believes in or simply performing for approval he doesn't truly value. The truth behind the work is also what women look for when trying to understand a man's character. Women don't just see the outcome, they sense the intention. They feel the energy behind what he chooses to create and how he chooses to show up. A man's artistic integrity becomes a signal, a sign of whether he can hold his ground, protect his values, and stay aligned with something deeper than the demand for validation. When a man compromises his work, women see more than a creative flaw. They see a fracture in his identity. The truth behind the work is the battle every man fights between who he wants to be and who the world pressures him to become. Men often carry the silent burden of being told to be practical, to be efficient, to be impressive. Yet their work silently asks them to be honest, to be patient, to be brave. The conflict between expectation and authenticity is where integrity is built. A man who chooses the harder path, the truthful path, becomes someone who can be trusted, admired, and followed. And in the eyes of both men and women, that kind of integrity is rare, unmistakable, and deeply respected. Choosing authenticity over approval is the moment a man decides that who he is matters more than who he is expected to be. Men are often conditioned to seek recognition from their peers, from society, from anyone who can validate that they are enough. But authenticity requires a different kind of strength. It demands that a man stand rooted in his truth, even when that truth is misunderstood or inconvenient. Approval comes quickly and fades quickly. Authenticity comes slowly and shapes a man for life. And the shift happens the moment he realizes that external applause can never replace internal alignment. Choosing authenticity over approval becomes even more meaningful through the eyes of women who watch how a man navigates pressure. Women naturally sense when a man changes himself to fit a room, when he abandons his values for acceptance, or when he hides parts of himself to avoid judgment. Approval chasing might impress for a moment, but it erodes trust over time. What truly earns respect is a man's willingness to stand firm in who he is, even if it costs him popularity. Authenticity shows a woman his backbone, his self-respect, his clarity, and that is far more powerful than any polished performance. Choosing authenticity over approval is the internal conflict men face every day between being liked and being real. Approval offers safety, connection, and predictable praise. Authenticity offers risk, vulnerability, and moments of uncomfortable honesty. But it also offers something approval never does: the chance to build a life, a craft, and a reputation grounded in truth. When a man chooses authenticity, he stops living for the expectations around him and starts living from the identity within him. And in both the eyes of men who follow him and women who believe in him, that choice becomes the foundation of genuine integrity. The shortcut always costs more than it saves, because every quick fix demands a piece of a man's integrity in exchange. Men are often tempted to chase results, faster success, quicker recognition, immediate validation. But shortcuts never come free. They quietly weaken the discipline, character, and depth required to create something meaningful. When a man tries to bypass the struggle, he also bypasses the growth that makes the struggle worthwhile. The work may look complete from the outside, but inside, he knows something essential is missing. The part that proves he earned it. The shortcut always costs more than it saves in the way women evaluate a man's intentions. Women notice the difference between effort and excuse, between commitment and convenience. A man who consistently chooses shortcuts sends a message that he is willing to compromise the very values he claims to stand for. This doesn't just affect his work, it affects trust. Women respect the man who stays the course, who refuses to sacrifice quality for speed, who understands that the long road is where integrity strengthens. They see patience as confidence and shortcuts as insecurity disguised as efficiency. The shortcut always costs more than it saves because it deprives men of the resilience required to sustain what they create. Men who rely on shortcuts often find themselves trapped in a cycle of shallow victories, impressive in the moment but fragile in the long run. The deeper truth is that the process shapes the creator more than the outcome ever will. Endurance, discipline, and honesty are built in the grind, not in the gaps. And when a man chooses the long, demanding, sometimes frustrating path, he becomes someone capable not just of achieving great work, but of sustaining it in the eyes of those who admire him and those who depend on him. When you compromise once, you compromise forever, because the first sacrifice of integrity is never the last. It becomes the beginning of a pattern. Men often believe they can bend their values just this one time, to fit in, to be accepted, or to avoid conflict. But that single decision leaves a mark. It becomes easier to bend again, and even easier after that. A man's identity isn't defined by the moments he stands tall when everyone is watching, but by the decisions he makes when no one would ever know the difference. The moment he trades truth for convenience, he opens the door for every future compromise to feel justified. When you compromise once, you compromise forever in the way women read a man's consistency. Women pay close attention to whether a man's actions match his principles, especially under pressure. A one-time compromise may seem small to him, but to her, it signals whether he can be trusted in the long run. If he lets go of his standards in his craft, she wonders where else he will let go. If he bends to external pressure in his work, she questions whether he'll bend in his relationships, his responsibilities, his promises. Integrity isn't about perfection. It's about predictability, the kind that reassures her she is standing beside a man who won't collapse when tested. When you compromise once, you compromise forever, because a man's internal compass becomes blurred every time he redraws the line he once swore he would never cross. Men often underestimate how deeply compromise affects their self-respect. Each time they make a choice that contradicts their values, the voice inside grows quieter and self-doubt grows louder. But the opposite is also true. Every time a man protects his standards, even in small, unseen decisions, his confidence sharpens, his integrity strengthens, and his work carries a weight that others can feel. Protecting the craft, even when no one is watching, is the purest expression of a man's character, because it reveals what he does when the world can no longer reward him. Men often perform at their best when eyes are on them, when wreck. Ignition is within reach when the spotlight gives their effort a sense of importance. But the true measure of a man is found in those quiet, uncelebrated hours where the only witness to his commitment is himself. That private discipline, the decision to honor the work even without applause, is what separates momentary effort from lasting integrity. In the unseen moments, a man discovers what he truly believes in. Protecting the craft, even when no one is watching, matters deeply to women, because it shows the difference between a man who performs and a man who is reliable. Women naturally feel the intention behind a man's actions. They sense whether he works hard because he wants to be admired or because he holds himself to a higher standard. When she sees him stay committed when there is nothing to gain, she sees the strength of his internal compass. She recognizes that his consistency is not dependent on circumstance, but anchored in principle. That kind of quiet reliability builds trust, creates emotional safety, and reveals a depth that no grand gesture could replace. Protecting the craft, even when no one is watching, shapes the way a man sees himself, because it reinforces the belief that his integrity is not for sale. Men live with an internal scorecard, a silent system of self-judgment that tracks whether they are living up to their own expectations. Cutting corners might go unnoticed by others, but a man always notices when he fails himself. Every time he chooses discipline over convenience, he strengthens that inner voice. Every time he honors the process, his self-respect grows a little louder. That private reinforcement becomes the foundation of confidence that others can feel but can never fully explain. And it's in these hidden decisions, the ones no one sees, that a man builds the kind of confidence, trustworthiness, and authenticity that define his artists. Tick integrity. Legacy belongs to those who refuse to dilute their art because lasting impact is never built on watered-down truth. Men often feel pressured to soften their message, adjust their voice, or fit into whatever mold earns the quickest acceptance. But legacy isn't created by those who blend in. It's created by those who remain loyal to what makes them distinct. The world remembers the ones who were willing to stand alone, to risk misunderstanding, to carry the weight of their vision without editing it for comfort. A man's art becomes unforgettable the moment he chooses depth over popularity, truth over trends, conviction over convenience. Legacy belongs to those who refuse to dilute their art in the way women interpret a man's relationship with his calling. Women pay attention not just to what he creates, but to how fiercely he protects the essence of it. When a man softens his standards to gain approval, she senses the cracks immediately. It tells her that his beliefs are negotiable, his identity flexible, his values dependent on who's watching. But when he holds firm, when he refuses to compromise, even when the world pressures him to, she sees a man who is anchored, principled, and worthy of trust. A woman can feel the difference between someone who creates for applause and someone who creates because his soul has something it refuses to silence. Legacy belongs to those who refuse to dilute their art because a man's self-respect is built on the purity of his intention. Men carry an internal identity shaped not by what they achieve, but by what they are willing to protect. When a man keeps his work honest, even at the cost of slower success, he reinforces a sense of personal strength that no external validation can provide. Each time he chooses integrity over compromise, he sharpens his own belief in himself. Each time he refuses to bend his standards, he builds a version of himself he can be proud of. The more he honors the core of his work, the more he strengthens the core of his character. Legacy belongs to those who refuse to dilute their art because true greatness requires the courage to remain undiluted in a world that constantly asks you to tone yourself down. Men who leave a legacy aren't just remembered for what they created, they're remembered for the conviction behind it. And that conviction, the unwavering commitment to protect the soul of their craft, becomes the strongest part of the story they leave behind.